Hello everybody, and Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
And have a good night, inshallah. And so we're going to speak about, inshallah, about the scientific refutation of Darwinism again. As per yesterday, we started with basic mechanisms of an impossibility of emergence of life by chance yesterday, and also talked about social Darwinism, the disasters brought to humanity by social Darwinism, because Mr. Adnan Oktar attaches much importance to Darwinism, because Darwinism has caused more than 350 million people to be killed in the 20th century. And the 20th century has become the bloodiest century of the entire human history because of this pagan religion of Darwinism. The basic concepts of Darwinism were applied into social sciences, and has been the foundation, ideological foundation of the many perverted ideologies of the 20th century, such as communism, fascism, wild capitalism, and terrorism or anarchism are all founded upon Darwinism. That is the reason why Darwinism is so important, and it's everybody's obligation. And even we may be a Muslim, or that might be our Christian and Jewish brothers and sisters, and that is their obligation also to struggle against Darwinism, because Darwinism denies the existence of a creator, of Allah. Now, the scientific refutation of Darwinism. If you go to the third channel, can we go to the third channel, please, inshallah? And there is a prominent evolutionist, Douglas Futuyma, from State University of New York. And Futuyma is a prominent Darwinist. He's an atheist. He gave us a very important criteria to falsify Darwinism. Futuyma said, organisms either appeared on the earth fully developed, or they did not. If they did not, they must have developed from pre-existing species by some process of modification. And if you pay attention to the underlying part, he says, if they did appear in a fully developed state, they must indeed have been created by some omnipotent intelligence. Basically, Futuyma says here that if the living beings appear in the history of life fully developed with their complex and perfect forms, then we have to admit that they are being created by an omnipotent intelligence, by Allah, he says.
Inshallah.
He gives us this criteria. In fact, all the scientific evidences, the fossil evidence, you know, first I want to explain what fossils are. Fossils are the remnants of the living beings which lived in the past. And you know, they are sometimes bone fractures, and a fracture of a skull, or sometimes the whole skeleton. And they are fossilized, and they are millions of years old, and they give us the information about what kind of species lived in the past, when did they appear in the history of life, etc. So if we look at the fossil evidence, we see exactly what Futuyma said. All the species appear in the history of life, all at once and fully developed. And that shows us, of course, evolution never happened. There are more than 350 million fossils we have today, and there are no transitions between species as alleged by the evolution, by Darwinism. Now, first, evolutionists have to answer three questions. The first question is, how did life originate on Earth? And the second question is, what are the mechanisms of evolution? And the third question is, if all the species on Earth are the result of evolution, then there must be a vast amount of fossil evidence of evolution. Are there any such fossils? Now we will evaluate these questions one by one. Not only this program, but in the following programs we will evaluate the rest of the questions. Now, question number one, how did the first living cell form? Now you see a computer over here. This is one of the largest and the best computers of the world, Cray X1 computer. Of course, a computer like this is the highest technology that humans can get in the 21st century, has a large capacity. However, if you check the DNA molecule for example, the human DNA molecule, which is about 1,000th of a millimeter of size. It's about 1 to 1.5 meter long and contains 3.2 billion letters, which is equal to 1 million pages of encyclopedia, any encyclopedia, 1 million pages of information in a single DNA molecule, but it is so small it can only be visualized with the electron microscope. Of course, the DNA molecule has much larger capacity and complexity than the largest computer of the world. And I can give you another example. This is a scientist whose name is Lenny Adelman from University of Southern California, calculated the amount of information in 1 gram DNA molecule. 1 gram is so small. The amount of information in 1 gram DNA molecule is equal to 1 trillion CDs. That makes, of course, approximately 200 trillion books. 200 trillion books of information are contained in 1 gram DNA molecule. This number, 200 trillion books, is 10,000s of times more than the entire number of the books written in the entire human history. There is no way this complexity with this huge amount of information, DNA, can be a product of coincidences. It is a very powerful evidence. It is created by an infinite wisdom and omnipotent intelligence of Allah.
Inshallah.
You see a metropolis over here. For example, Istanbul, New York, London, or Paris. Of course, a large city like this, it has high-tech power stations, it has security systems, refineries, laboratories, or highways and transport systems. It has gates to enter and exit the city. If you check a single cell, you see a single cell over here, which is about 1,000th of a millimeter in size. It has a huge data bank, the genetic information, the DNA, the nucleus. It has high-tech power stations, which are technologically more advanced than the most advanced nuclear power station of the world, mitochondria. It has factories called ribosomes. It has refineries. It has high-tech laboratories. It has transportation systems, highways, and it has gates to enter and exit the cell. Basically, the cell has organelles, like mitochondria, ribosomes, protein factories, or lysosomes, or Golgi apparatus, or the nucleus itself. So, if any one of these organelles fails to function, the cell cannot remain alive. This is a scientific fact. For example, if it doesn't have a functioning mitochondria, or if it doesn't have a functioning ribosome, there is no way the cell can remain alive. The cell does not have the opportunity to wait for unconscious mechanisms of Darwinism, such as mutation and natural selection, to permit it to develop. Therefore, the first cell on Earth was necessarily a complete cell, possessing all these required functions and organelles. And this definitely means the cell had to be created by Allah. And in fact, we see the evidence from the fossils. The fossil evidence tells us that the first cell, the first living cell appeared in the history of life, all at once, possessing all these required functions and organelles. That means, of course, it is created by Allah. This is the fossil evidence. This is from Australia. We see a 3.5 billion years old bacteria fossil. This is the oldest living cell in the history of life. This is the fossil of the oldest living cell in the history of life. It is 3.5 billion years old bacteria fossil. You see on the right side, Leptolingbia bacterium, which is alive today. So it is almost the same. For 3.5 billion years of time, the first cell appears all at once and never changes for 3.5 billion years. Remember what Futuyma said, Douglas Futuyma? He said, if the living beings appear fully developed, that means they are being created by an omnipotent intelligence. And this fossil evidence tells us, scientific fact, that it is created by Allah, the first cell.
Inshallah.
And it's a complete cell. So remember what the allegation of Darwinism of evolution is, that the first cell, according to Darwinism, should appear step by step by coincidences and over a long period of time. No. First of all, scientifically and logically it is impossible, and scientific evidence tells us the first living cell in the history of life appears all at once, and it's a complete and it appears with all of its complexity, all organelles, possessing all these organelles. And this is also from Australia, 3.5 years by billion years old cyanobacteria fossils from apex chert. You see the fossils, it is exactly the same of the cyanobacteria of today. And the cyanobacteria has the feature that they can do the photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is an incredibly complex chemical system possessed by the cyanobacteria or by the plants. And this first cell in the history of life, which is 3.5 billion years old, can do photosynthesis and appears all at once with all of its organelles as a complete cell. Of course, this is a very powerful evidence that it is created by Allah. And this is from Nature magazine, stating that the apex chert cyanobacteria of microfossils are 3.5 billion years old. And there is a rule in the biology. This book, textbook of biology, is the most famous or prominent textbook of biology in the world. It's called Biology, Textbook of Biology, Campbell and Rees. And Neil Campbell, one of the authors in this book, stated, as far as we know, all life today arises only by the reproduction